right. So acoustic resonance Scram Tech. I'll just get right out of the way. I actually have that already on my um so your hang glider tech, but actually I put it on my airship. But actually I put it on, man, this goes back really far on my YouTube channel, like almost a year ago. But the basic premise is, they're like shock wavies, brrr. And I'm like, detonation mix-a-woos. It's like, you're probably already gonna leave. That should probably get rid of you. That's good. I don't want you around if you can't figure it out about how to have fun. But the acoustic resonance is something that just undulates. There's a different type of pump, right? That allows for that. But that means undulation creates compression, ram, and scram. It also means that you can have a area inside that is a vacuum. It also means you can use that vacuum like a Stirling pump using piezoelectrics and some other basic materials. You can convert electricity into a very, very fast moving pump that's extraordinarily efficient. But we're not fully done. Okay. Detonations are something that, while seem good, are not actually as good as you might expect unless you know what the hell you're doing with them. Okay, they're basically explosions. You don't want explosions most of the time, right? Except here, I'm gonna make in that hang glider tech video a plasma in the core in the center, and then an ionic fuel that I'm using to combine towards the end towards the nozzle that goes into a combustion chamber that efficiently mixes it. That means I can accelerate it insanely fast, and they want to actually come together in an incredibly mixed fashion. And then they burn. Now, the plasma is actually oxygen because I use a nitrogen filter. I run a current through because I have to run the damn undulations of the acoustic resonance. I don't have to slow it down, shockingly, like ram air. I then get a turbo to scram effect because I'm able to accelerate it so much faster. But not only that, I'm also able to charge it and use that as a Z pinch for the plasma that accelerates it, heats it up, but also because of that shear, that creates an acoustic resonance attractive acceleration, linear acceleration, but also changes the undulational size of the acoustic resonance tube that we're talking about. That means I have the ability to go well past your little Mach 7 for your scram, and detonation actually starts off at the nozzle. I'm at a detonation constant velocity where it combines and then goes into the mixing full burn into the then bell end, which the reason why I have the prop is because I'm accelerating it even more because I'm using the acoustic resonance and I need a balancer. A harmonic balancer and pump makes total sense because that's how you spin things in space, right? Well, this can now travel much faster. It can rotate extraordinarily efficiently for the given gas acceleration profile. But if you want to know what's even better, if you want to remove that, because like this is meant for a hang glider, it was never meant really for Mach 7. This is going to get, for the memes, 777 miles an hour at 69,420 feet. Instead of like this, which has a bunch of shit to handle very high heats of friction in the air. You know what I mean? I'm like, nah, I don't really want to do that. That seems insane. Hang glider? No. So we're gonna ditch the prop, and then that's actually a secondary chamber. That bell end is now a secondary chamber. But that also means that I effectively am gonna be pumping more through. That's where detonation undulational velocities start to occur. So the outer side then gets accelerated from a larger to a much smaller moment because there are electrostatic, Lemke, and Lorentz and electromagnetic forces that are going to be used. That's me. That's right. I'm that guy. My name's in there. Suck it the fuck up. We're then going to compress it by heat exchanging. So effectively, what's in that second bell-end, right, which isn't really, it's just a bell-end, but now it's the secondary combustion chamber, is effectively the equivalent of a bunch of electrostatic Z-pinch current. As it goes through, the burn, it wicks through, and it creates an arc Z shear. Effectively, think like a fuel cell, like a radiator, like a bunch of stators are there. And then it cools itself as it forces itself through a bunch in line with the direction of travel. This re-accelerates it and actually makes it go into a much more compressed state. It then goes through a second nozzle, right? And then you have a bell end. This now means I have something that can easily go to Mach 32 if you wanted to somehow magic that up in our atmosphere. It's not really magic. It is physics, but it's like, yeah, how are you just angling it down at the right angle? You're in the top of our atmosphere. Stay in our atmosphere. Stay in. Stay. You know what I mean? I wouldn't. We can probably do it, but like, you know, point is, once you get towards Mach 12, you start getting out of the atmosphere insanely fast. So curvature of the Earth and altitude becomes your big deal. And instead of the hang glider tech or any of that, this is pure and simple for actual planes that have coatings to make sure you don't die because of high friction and heat. Like an actual plane, right? This isn't for an airship. This isn't for a hang glider. This isn't for any of that. You don't need to be able to get out of the atmosphere these kinds of engines at all. In any way, you can effectively thrust by the time you get too near out of atmosphere with stored fuel and electrical like ion plasma propulsion combos that I've talked about in this, which essentially means you plug up the top and then you undulate it through. That helps the resonance, that helps the burn, that helps pump through it faster, and that helps combine it, and it does it again. You don't need to go that fast, but what that means is you get a high Q value energy out because then you can have a massive bell end that you can drain a little bit of ionic fuel in a very lean mix for that plasma into the bell end that cools it. So that fuel is very cold and then it wicks in with this hollow teardrop shape that has stators. So the stators are meant to be also very low resistance, low drag resistance, but it's also where that hollow teardrop, it's got a hole in the center, right? And what that means is as it goes through, there's a lot of wicking effects, and you also get a lot of increased acceleration and capture as the overhangs, which are kind of like what you call carburetors for Venturi effects, for Bernoulli's principles, or Venturi, not Venturi, but whatever, gives you the basics of how to cool the bell end, but also provide power as that expansion then goes back towards where the nozzle and it has to squeeze itself forward. And so you can dynamically play with that bell end and your fuel use for proper efficient capture in space. But I've talked about that on my channel about 5 maybe more times already, which is the reason why you're probably listening to this for an acoustic resonance Scram Tech. It's like, cool beans, NASA, except that seems stupid, and I'm getting a detonation velocity that's in flow with your travel that in no way needs anything except a little bit of plasmification and ionification of your air in a double tube with a triple tube on the outside, which is an undulational pump, which is an acoustic resonance. Which it's like scram means no, it's static fixed. And I'm like, yeah, but that means it operates best at one given passive speed and frequency. That means this is this altitude, that is that speed, and that's all you can do for that given design. Of course, you're going to alter it eventually to have variability to increase dynamic efficiencies. So here you go. Here's how to make it. Except, wait, I'm the one that did the design. It's mine, Xenon Reality. Hi, NASA. You know what I mean? And it's a RAM. It'll work as a RAM too, for what it's worth, because that third one can get pumped into the center core for the rear of the main burn combustion chamber. But the thing is, it has extraordinarily high efficiency because it's starting at a detonation, but it's because it's attracted to each other that it's pulling itself together for the given electricity used. Not to mention, it's like a fuel cell, which is a what is it? The electron redox flow that iron oxide batteries will use because it's super hot. It has to make electricity flow to do this, which means that with a basic substrate catalyst, effectively, that takes during the nitrogen separation, the fuel, it adds nitrogen into the fuel and makes it ionic during that moment because it creates a lot of, for that given burn, an acoustic resonance, which is why it's piezoelectric, an increased amount of electricity that goes into generating the very scram ram and standard like a turbojet, except it's not because it's an acoustic resonance pump, which effectively means I don't have to worry about something spinning exceedingly fast and having creep issues. Instead, I have pressure, which effectively just changes based upon the size of your diameter of your pipe, and boundary layers, which are essentially nil because there's a plasma and electromagnetic fields that have to contain it. Hypervelocity flow is achieved very efficiently. Detonation is nice, but I actually use detonation to accelerate to near light speed at the end of that second bell end. But that's usually for space. Okay. That's right. It's an accelerator, but it's a mass accelerator that's insanely high efficient. See, but while Q value is very high, and that's great, doing that in our atmosphere is a bomb. It's literally called particle accelerative fusion for a reason. So we're not going to do that. And instead, it's going to equal very close to what it is your speed is and the drag frictional coefficients are that you need to match to maintain your given velocity for the given size of bell end that can extend out in bloom a little bit. It's like a double arrow spike, but then it's a bigger bell end. It cools itself, which is nice. You're gonna need that. But that's the end of it. Like the acoustic resonance Scram Tech is like effectively all of your things except why didn't you just do tubes? Like seriously, why aren't you just doing like the little thrust vector like squeezy nozzle thing and some undulations of tubes? Why aren't you just doing that? It seems so simple. Why don't you just do that? That's me though. Just because like I'm that guy that goes like, yeah, but we have tube pumps and acoustic resonant pumps, and we have Stirling engines, and we know how to use that. We know how to use electric. We know how to do all of the things I just said. Why don't we do this? Because shut up over there. I'm thinking really hard about how to fucking phrase this like I'm not stupid, and I thought about it, but something was not doable for some reason. That's not true. It's definitely doable. You're never getting away with that. No one's gonna believe you. I have to spin. Look, we've done it this way for years. There's many jobs for how we build our turbines and compressors. Sir, our materials are very important. These jobs are salaries. Ah! Meanwhile, me. Some graph whiteys and some coily woilies of the copper variety will make it go burry whir well enough. Get the right stator and like slippity slip linear bearings. Some what is this? Wait, I need to do a hydraulic fluid with what is this? Fuel? Oh my god, is that fuel? Do you have fuel over there? You got fuel? I need that right there. Anyways, I'm pumping it there, right? Yeah. So then effectively it's a bunch of tubes that undulate. Yes, like you know, a pump that acoustically resonates. I'm gonna be really crass for a second because the joke is here. It's like when a woman comes, which you probably never managed to make her do. It undulates from the opening to where the cervix is, trying to pull in the semen that you, in like a very little amount of time, manage to put a small, nice dab in. Fucking gabagoos. Behold! Acoustic resonance Scram Tech. It's like vagina's coming really fast. You should be laughing. I thought it was a great joke. Honestly. Or you could be laughing. I don't know. Point is, please write in the comments if you're laughing. But like crash joke over. It's effectively, yeah, it's a type of pump that they already have. But this one doesn't need rotating anything. It's just piezoelectrics and some pumps, effectively. Which would be, I suppose, supplied by the hydraulic fluid, right? And then because it already starts, because you're pressurizing it to begin with, it then starts to burn something and it'll match that with the hydraulic fluid and start pumping in fuel itself. Like shocks and springs, right? Burning the fuel make it go burr faster, faster. making zoom zoom juice out the end more refined. Then zoomity zoom you go like your dog. You fucking fuck up idiots that apparently couldn't just shut up for a while. How does this work? 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 I don't know how any of that work. Please explain exacting detail all how this work. Provide diagram, provide many all the ways, provide exacting details so that way I can copy and make it myself. I can do it and then I'll be the guy that has made it. How did this work? I'll dumb it down for you real hard. Whoosh. Do you get it now? That's not what I was like. Idiot! Fucking retards! I just told you, were you listening? Fucking hate people sometimes. Anyways, that is the technology of the acoustic resonance Scram Tech that could get you in orbit easily if you wanted to with a vacuumed out little bladder and rigid air structure frame for that, for like an airship that can expand based upon effectively a little bit of threaded rods and some rotation of them that allows for that to become more buoyant. And then you can take a basic profile of going to the slipstream as you're starting to lift and travel forward and burn some of your fuel, to then go higher and higher and faster because the slipstream's relative is around 300 something miles an hour. But what's better is that as you get higher, of course, it's not there anymore. But if you're traveling 600 miles an hour because the air around you is traveling 300 miles an hour, you're really only traveling 300 miles an hour. And so you can achieve a moment where you can get into supersonic speeds for a craft that size, or your little dummy dumb small boy ass, that happens to then accelerate up to such a high amount in a very high atmosphere that you can now easily perform scramjets, as of course the acceleration is more than the air velocity around you, which immediately rams and then scrams air in, that you have already been able to start producing more and more speed. And so you'll transition much easier, then be able to get to the very upper reaches of our atmosphere, close off the intake, and then burn effectively some relatively concentrated hydrogen peroxide and nitromethane methanol and ethanol. And that should give you everything you're looking for, because you can also add in an increased degree by having just another nitrogen filter during that resonance pump and a little bit of extra air filtration, a storage and compression, because of course you're very high up in a very high altitude, and there's a lot of ozone once you get up there, as a compression with a standard. You can probably take on board a basic oxygen bottle of some kind, right? But also For me, it's a, hey, remember that thing that's like thermite and then like electron redox flow? Yeah. Yeah. So like if you take on some vapor deposition, depositing in a vacuum, some oxidized material that is readily willing to produce a lot more oxygen while you have stored oxygen with your extra oxygen that you also stored on board with a little bit of electricity because you burn some shit, you'll be able to power and fuel your rocket engine in space now because you don't have to store on board as much fuel. You can take on fuel later and use your acceleration or velocity to make fuel using the filter and everything, right? But you've stored on board something that will be able to make fuel from you burning your fuel to continue making more effectively fuel and continue running for longer using electricity, which is not from nowhere. That's called piezoelectrics and undulations, obviously. Not to mention, it's an airship. Just put some fucking solar panels too on it. Like, what the fuck are you on about, you dumb, stupid cunts that think I don't have electricity somehow? Then, we're not done yet. I stored more oxygen on there before. I didn't just make oxygen and then store it. I had just pure oxygen and a basic, almost monopropellant, which I didn't talk about this, but like you can use electricity in a substrate like catalytic for nitrogen and methane because it's nitromethane, but it's a little bit more complicated. But if you know what you're doing, you don't need nitric acid at all. It's effectively pressurized nitrogen, and since you have a nitrogen filter, you would be able to make with the right, substrate catalyst that's heated with like a fuel cell. You run electricity through it. Like fuel cell makes electricity when you separate things or combine them, right? But if you push in electricity with these catalysts, you make a chemical combo occur. It's more likely to happen now. That's why it's called a catalyst, right? Now, the reason why a lot of people don't talk about it is because it's like, well, it's effectively quartz, some refined silicon, and uh, lithium, if you want to. More often than not, you won't use lithium, but you can use lithium if you wanted to. Um, let's see here. They go with manganese. I don't do manganese. I use a, see here, iodine. I use iodine. Iodine is usually easy enough to find. An iodine silicon dioxide with a refined silicon then means you have a separated silicon iodine solution that's in a substrate that allows for a metalloid, meaning you can pass electricity through it. Then it creates a very specific charge catalytic variant that's very good at combining into nitromethane. But it can also be cooled using regular old water without needing to worry about it breaking down. But I'm gonna move on because it's like you're not really supposed to know that. That's a top secret thing. Like it's like this is our patent. You're not allowed to know about how this works. We are not telling you the blah 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 blah. Meanwhile, me shocky shocky go burr make burn juice because it makes actually a different type of nitromethane that likes to make effectively a fuel oxidizer. It's an actual rocket fuel at that point. Like nitromethane is what's coming out, except it has an attached extra a couple oxygen effectively that you can attach to it, and so it'll burn by itself. But it's like, yeah, it's not very explosively reactive though. No, it's fairly stable. Letting people know. In fact, you have to have something else burn for it to burn. Like normally nitromethane can burn with oxygen or whatever, right? Like a spark. You actually need a actual burning like methanol or ethanol or something burning under pretty decently high pressure for it to now burn like that. Which is nice, except I kind of just wanted nitromethane. You know what I mean? But for me, it was like, oh, a couple of extra oxygen goes a long way here. It'll burn for a really long time, and my fuel goes way further. But if you're not a chemistry expert or anything, you probably shouldn't do it. So don't do that. Uh, Basic methanol, nitromethane, like you can usually try and get like higher concentrations of nitromethane somewhere. Sometimes it depends. And sometimes you can figure out how to get nitric acid or certain things that can make you nitric acid, right? Cheaply. And then you can make a lot of nitromethane, which is fine. Nitromethane is honestly not that bad, but don't tell people how to do that, usually, except I just kind of did, and it's pretty easy to find it. This is more about large volumetric masses of nitromethane. For cheap as fuck, by the way. But um, what I'll tell you is ethanol is easier. You can make and distill your own ethanol. Like it's literally like if you have any organic waste, anything that has some kind of like sugar, will do it. You know what I mean? And uh, you can make a lot of. You'd be surprised. You can make a lot of diesel doing that. Like if you know what you're doing, you can make a bunch of diesel. You don't even need to really refine it that much. Like you really just need to make sure it's filtered enough so that way it'll go through your fuel pump and it won't gum up, right? And oxygen is then just usually like some degree of oxidized material that's around a surrounded catalyst that's willing when electricity and some heat is applied to readily uh, convert to mostly oxygen, right? And during that exchange, because of the heats there, it'll burn a lot more efficiently in space because it also produces work energy for electricity. Because electricity has to go to something. Well, if we're talking thermite, then it's like, well, it did go to something. You know what I mean? It went to doing this thing called ionification and a lot of plasmification. But then it also decided to do the thing of I'm now a shit ton more mass and I want to go Berber really fast that way. And I don't need to use nearly as much fuel to to get the same level of thrust, right? Which is a good thing. You want huge thrust. Uh, like high Q value energy is if you have to have a solid fuel on board that you use a little bit of electricity and heat to effectively potentiate into a given type of thrust mass profile, then it's like might as well do that. Like a little bit of I'm gonna burn something anyways. So might as well do that. Yeah. You know what I mean? And now I have way less amount needed to gain a increased total orbit velocity characteristic to my airship, which is the reason why I made acoustic resonance Scram Tech a thing. That's why I made it. It's like I wanted to make an airship that it could go into orbit velocity off of practically just scrap. You know what I mean? It's like some graphite that I machine a little bit, It's some, like, hydraulic fluid, there's some tubes like chromoly or whatever, something that's rigid enough and it's gonna be able to handle some heat and pressure, right? And then, like, some powder coating or whatever will do it. Some linear bearings, which you can get from, like, motorcycles and stuff, and, so on in terms of, all the rest of the components that will effectively make the entirety of an acoustic resonance Scram Tech engine that can go into space because that's just hydraulic fluid, and then it closes off the front. So it's like those are sliding slots that close over the front and then they slide together and they are able to handle the heat and pressure because effectively they start at this type of heat and pressure and it wants to go towards the vacuum, which then goes and compresses it, burns some more, makes more acceleration occur, and all the rest is effectively history out the back of the bell end for very low amounts of fuel use, which is great. But like thermite's nice, but that's the catalytic area, right? Like you have to pump fuel through, then the fuel has to go through that, and a little bit of that's going to get into the plasma, which is fine. And some of it will get into the fuel, right? I don't care because I have a bunch more oxygen, right? And that's more mass, anyways. I also get a bunch more electricity because I don't need to burn as much electricity, in terms of resistance profiles for piezoelectrics and movement, right? Then that means I gain greater Q values again. I have a stored battery I'm going to burn and yeet out my bell end that makes way more mass accelerate way faster, and I can burn far less now, which gives me a better outright G thrust for much longer for outright delta V. But I don't have initially that delta V when I start. I will gain more delta V because I'm filtering and compressing once I get into the upper atmospheres, which gives me an easier time because it was designed for going into orbit, yes, but it was also designed to go to the moon. So I would orbit and elongate my orbit, try and get to a gravitational turn orbit that would then get me to a Lagrange point, and I could burn from there, and then I could get over to a orbit to the moon and then land. Which turns out you can easily do that with an airship and that setup. That's roughly the size of about two fully loaded school buses. Big boy buses. The bigger top, and all that. Like two of those will get you enough buoyancy for a two-person endeavor with all the fuel, and you can even have food and water and all that, right? But that also means I have solar panels and I've got all the rest of it that's there, which is nice. Uh, but it also changes. Like that threaded rod doesn't just extend and increase buoyancy. I'm also extending a solar cell, which is technically not a solar cell. It's the solar panels. Okay. But on the other side, it's a bunch of heat dissipation, solar, IR, right? Because I don't want to get super hot or super cold on that, right? So that's kind of what that is. Uh, but that also means I get to pump fuel through that until it goes into the actual engine, which cools the solar panels, captures a large amount of it. But I also, in between each of the cells, have a bunch of coils of copper and a bunch of lines of copper, which when I pulse them the right way and at the right frequency with the volt and amps, I create like a projected magnetosphere, which isn't really a real magnetosphere, but it acts like that. It acts like a buffer zone for charged particles. And a little bit of light goes a long way there too, in between. So LED strips with a little Lorentz styles of lenses, not lensing, but anyways, and some mirrors for reflection from light that's coming through. I then get a basic laser that then can frequency destructively match, or well, destructively interfere, but frequency match the ones I'm looking for my solar panels, and correct them to be able to make more power that way, but also prevent and try and use that as extra pressure with the magnets to remove more and more of the charged particles that are flying through space, both from the sun, but also where we're traveling for the moon, which effectively meant like I made a big cocoon both in front of me and behind me of a magnetosphere that ran through and forward, and it went towards the central core of this, which is kind of where we are. But then that charge is for the core. That's an intake, effectively, or uh, the engine more than anything. And then that makes a lot less of the particles ever reach anything. Like radiation becomes much more manageable uh, by using that destructive interference and constructive interference. Magnets, electromagnetic fields, really, it's on the. It's not just on that, but it's also on the surface of the airship and inside of the like little where you're gonna be in for the ship, container thing. And so, like, that means I have multiple ways of preventing most charged particles from entering in. But it's still got some decent graphite and lead and steel combos to it that are layered, right? And then it was like, well, I also need to make sure I do this other thing called an atmosphere. So I made it like a bladder skin that's at the outside. There's a vacuum in the inside, but the outside is a charged atmosphere. So it's like, well, I have a magnetosphere. It's like charged particles get captured in an atmosphere in the upper atmosphere, right? Because we have a sphere, magnetosphere, right? So it's like, well, behold, aurora borealis air that's going to filter our carbon dioxide pretty darn efficiently, and we get back a lot of our oxygen that we let go during that. There's a lot of electricity, of course, and there's a lot of charged particles and radiation that helps that, because otherwise it wouldn't do it, but it does actually do that. And so I was like, all right, so this is like a about a week to get land, and sort of like, hey, this is a rock, and then you gotta reaccelerate back to Earth, kind of stuff, that sort of thing. And it was super cheap. This was about $40,000 to make, all told, for parts and stuff that I was thinking about. But then again, that was also like, well, I'm gonna build. Well, I'm not gonna buy them, this direct part. I'm gonna buy machines that make the machines that then make the other machine that then eventually gets me to the whole thing. So it was like 40,000, right? Is all I needed to get to the moon if I did it that way. 120,000 if I wanted to buy the parts specifically for it. Considering they spend hundreds of billions on average to get to the moon, I was like, well, that's a massive change. That would probably be good. They would probably, oh, they don't even look my way. Oh, thanks, NASA. They they don't even do that. Sure would like that. That'd be nice. Go fuck yourself. Acoustic resonance Scram Tech, They could get you to the moon for a fucking thousandth of your price or some shit that you currently have going on. Lame. Anyways, Like, subscribe, share, hit the notification, tell all your friends about how you could suck my dick or some shit. Fucking government. How does that work? How does that work? How does that work? Fuck off. Bye.